We said we are going to dive into it, Clay. I kind of want to because I voted for this.
Yeah.
Short way to put it. I voted for this. I did. I wanted somebody who was going to come in and say this cultural Marxism, this Maoist cultural revolution that was really put in motion by the 8 years of Obama, but continued during the presidency of Joe Biden. This uh, turning our back on our history, rewriting history, feeling like we should all be, or at least some of us should be sorry for American history. All this, no, enough is enough. And I think that we reached our fill of that nonsense a long time ago. But here is a moment in time where I actually wasn't even expecting Trump to do this. I didn't know this was going to happen. He has said that it is time for the Washington Commanders to go back to the Redskins. He had a post on Truth Social. He said, the Washington whatevers should immediately change their name back to the Washington Redskins football team. There's a big clamoring for this. Likewise, the Cleveland Indians, one of the 6 original baseball teams with a storied past, our great Indian people in massive numbers want this to happen. Their heritage and prestige is systematically being taken away from them. Times are different now than they were 3 or 4 years ago. We are a country of passion and common sense. All caps. Owners, get it done. Mr. Clay, is this going to get done? What do you make of this? What do you think of this? Is it possible? And what do the fans want? Take me through it.
So I put up a poll, and I'm not saying that my audience is 100% representative of the average sports fan, but my poll showed 97% of my audience wanted the name to go back to Washington Redskins. And I asked the question, and I think it's a good one. Is there anybody out there that, even if they are super left-leaning, where it would be 97-3 the other way? Right? So let's presume Keith Olbermann put up this poll for his audience. I don't think 97% of his audience, even though they are super left-wing, crazy, insane people, would vote, hey, keep the Washington Commanders name. And I don't know. The team and New York, correct me if I'm wrong, has not commented on this yet. The Cleveland Indians did. And they said, we love the Guardians. And everybody listening in Cleveland right now is saying, no, we don't. This is a stupid name. We would much prefer that the Cleveland Indian name came back. But I would say that what is interesting to me about this is twofold. One, Trump is putting it on his shoulders and actually giving the team a little bit of a pass, because he's saying, hey, if you want a brand new stadium on federal land in Washington, D.C., and you want the federal government and the District of Columbia government to help you and provide hundreds of millions of dollars in financing, then one of the conditions associated with this is, I think you should be the Redskins again. I don't dislike that. This is not somebody deciding to come into a private business and dictate how they do business. He's saying, hey, if you want the federal government's help to build a great new stadium in Washington, D.C., then there are all sorts of conditions that the government, as a partner in this negotiation, would demand. Returning the name of Redskins, I think, is a significant ask, but also a reasonable one. Point two, this is, I think, symbolically important, because I hinted at this when we went to break. I like to think of myself as a reasonable person. Now, some of you out there might say, you are crazy. You're not real. Okay. But I think in general, I have my pulse on the average sports fan in America. I think I could sit down with them no matter where they're from, and we could have a good conversation no matter what their background. Buck points out, and I do think it's true, that if you are a college football fan, I feel like I could find common ground with you.
Clay
No matter who you
Clay's
root
not
for.
really a big hug guy, but if you like college football, just give him a hug when you see him. He's fine with it. As long as you say you love a college football team, preferably SEC. Maybe shake his hand if you're not an SEC fan, but if you love college football, you can definitely shake and just give him a hug if you like the SEC. He's fine with it.
I think we speak a common language. And for a long time, I was of the opinion, hey, I'm so tired of the mascot argument, and I think this is the average guy and gal out there that I was reasonable and I said, okay, we'll give up Redskins, we'll give up Indians, we won't fight that hard over this, and it'll just put it to rest forever. And it never does because leftists aren't satisfied ever. They never sit back and say, hey, you know what? We're happy. And I would say this. Think about gay marriage, whatever you think about gay marriage. I thought when gay marriage happened, okay, we've reached the logical extension of the left in America. There is nowhere else they can go. Instead, they weren't happy with that. They decided that men had to win women's championships because men are actually women. And they decided that, hey, also, let's argue that if you don't accept someone else's changed gender, you're a bigot. And Buck is right here. I think if they could continue the advance, it would move on to, hey, it's unacceptable if you're a man and you don't want to sleep with a man pretending to be a woman because they're real women too. Chicks with are just normal chicks. And that was a bleep. I didn't say it. But that's kind of where we're headed. And so my point on this is the crazy just gets accelerated. And there isn't a reasonable, hey, okay, once and for all, we've negotiated this like business people would. And you say, we're going to put this behind us now. This is a negotiation. They keep asking for more. And so I think instead of giving them more, culturally, you have to take back what you already gave them. And you have to draw the line and say, we're not playing this game anymore.
A lot of colleges have changed, particularly if they had anything that is Indian or Native American related. A lot of colleges have changed their mascot. Dartmouth, that's one of the worst examples of this, I think, just because they went from they went from their Indian mascot to the big green. What is that? That's not I don't even know what is the big green. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
You're the color. I mean, it's also it makes no sense at all. I'm trying to see some of these other ones here. St. John's. I actually had a St. John's Redmen starter jacket growing up, just because I thought it was cool. And they changed that one to the Red Storm. UMass was the Minutemen, and then they got rid of that. What's wrong with the Minutemen? I mean, naming things after
Colonials. The Colonials are gone at George Washington. The Colonial Army was fighting against colonization. And they decided because it had colonial in it, it had to go because people are too much of morons to even understand language these days. And frankly, universities, which should exist to educate morons, AKA 18-year-olds, I'm still fired up about this. They changed the name to the GW Revolutionaries. And I don't think it's coincidental that the Quad immediately got taken over by a bunch of crazy left-wing radicals who want to say they put the cafe, or however you pronounce it, on George Washington's statue in the center of campus. You can't embolden idiots.
I didn't know about this one. Eastern Washington University used to be, the mascot was the Savages. That's pretty badass.
That's good. I mean, yes.
You know, if you're on the if your team is called the Savages, I feel like you're getting fired up before you get out there on the field. There's a lot of these. Elon University was the Fighting Christians, and they changed that. You can't even do that one.
Well, I mean, there was pressure on Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, which is one of the great mascots. And again, we just have to end it.
That would be so. To me, the Fighting Irish thing. First of all, no Irish people are no people of Irish descent are offended. The whole thing is absurd. A leprechaun, it's cute, it's funny, until you see the Leprechaun movies, which are actually terrifying, with Warwick Davis, who you know from Willow, which is a fun movie, throwback. But the actual Leprechaun movies, have you ever seen them, Clay? Very unsettling. He's a mean little leprechaun. He's not nice.
The horror
not
movie.
Nice. It's a horror movie. Some people are saying the meanest leprechaun. Don't see those. Don't let your kids see them either. But you see, the Fighting Irish is such a brand that I think it's safe because it's always about what's the brand value versus what's the outcry going to be. Same thing with Yale, as I pointed out before. Elihu Yale was a slave trader. Yale University is named for a person who was enriching himself off of the slave trade. So it in some ways, how much worse can it be in this? It's you own slaves, that's bad, right? But if you're making money by making sure as many people as possible own slaves, you would think that would be pretty bad. But people go to Yale to say they go to Yale. They don't want to say they go to Southeastern New Haven College of whatever. They want to say they go to Yale. And the Fighting Irish is a great nickname, and there's no reason why anybody should want that to be changed. As I pointed out, though, I was always waiting for the Vikings to come under heat. Because the Vikings did a lot of loot and pillage, a lot of nasty stuff. Went into actually the Irish monasteries, looted those. Bad things going on there. Vikings were not a bunch of cuddly guys with weird horned helmets on. That's also, by the way, a total anachronism. They never had horned helmets. That comes from opera. Anyway, whole other thing. But this is something that finally Trump is saying this is just crazy town. And whether the team switched back or not, I'm just glad, Clay, that someone's calling this out and saying that it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to live our lives walking on eggshells because miserable libs demand it.
Here's a question for the history nerds out there. I have an argument that I think is accurate, but it feels to me like society at large is essentially saying everything that happened from about 2014 to 2022 was completely wrong, and we're in the process of erasing all of it. Whether it's BLM protests, whether it was the response to COVID, whether it was the changing of the nicknames, whether it was Leah Thomas winning a women's swimming championship.
This is the counter-revolution. This is the Trump counter-revolution to the Maoist insanity.
What is another American analogy of something like this happening? Because the 1960s is probably the easiest era.
I was going to probably Reaganism as a response to all the just degrading and anti-American nonsensical radicalism of the late 60s and in through the 70s, the Vietnam era. I think Reaganism
was the response to that.
Yeah.
But I would say there was actually some good, clearly, that came out of the civil rights movement, right? It's good that everybody who's an American citizen should be able to freely vote and everybody. So what is good that came out of 2014 to 2022? That is a lasting legacy of usually you have progress and people say, okay, that progress is good. And then it goes too far, right? The pendulum swings too far. And you can go from, hey, we should have equal rights in America. Everyone should. That's an aspirational goal. But maybe, hey, you shouldn't define who gets into a school based on the color of your skin. That's swinging it too far. In other words, civil rights, okay, great society, too much with LBJ. What is the good? This is what I think is really kind of fascinating about this. What is something good that happened from 14 to 22? And I understand
the proliferation of police body cams, which is essentially the end of the anti-cop and BLM movement.
Oh, that's a good argument. That's a good argument.
So, an unintentional
consequence.
But that consequence is real. The reason you don't see these huge anti-cop protests the way is because the internet and body camera footage. And we see, I'm actually constantly amazed at how reasonable and even deferential police are in the face of a lot of aggression and disrespect. That's what you actually see when you pay attention to the reality of the video footage on these body cams. And the other thing is when there's a cop who crosses the line, everyone hates that, including cops. They don't want bad cops. They don't want cops who are hurting people when they're not supposed to. So, there's nothing but upside on the body cams.
It's a great point because BLM basically has been destroyed because one, it led to way more death, everything else. But every time they try to make a viral incident, if it's almost always you're like, man, the cops showed a lot of restraint there.
Yes.
Right? I mean, overwhelmingly, the person's name goes viral. Social media is like, by the way, what I would say all of this is connected to, and this is for future historians, I think it was everybody went crazy because of social media. I think that's the linchpin that undergirds it all.
I want to tell you about Preborn. They do incredible work saving the lives of tiny babies. Clay and I were just talking last hour about how abortion isn't quite the national political issue that the Democrats were hoping it would be. Unfortunately, one of the reasons is that there's so much abortion that's still happening, especially in these blue states and even in purple states. There's just high levels of abortion going on. So, how do you save tiny babies in the womb? How do you bring those precious lives into the world? Preborn is on this mission day in and day out. They do this by welcoming in pregnant mothers who aren't sure what they're going to do. And they say, let's just start with this. We'll give you a free ultrasound so you can meet the little baby in your womb. The preborn clinics are so welcoming, so kind. I've been to one, I visited here in Miami, and they just want to help moms and save babies. But they need your help. A $28 donation will pay for an ultrasound. A lot of you could afford to do $28 a month, and it would be such an incredible generosity and something that I think will really lift your spirit when you think about the tiny babies that you're helping to save day in and day out. $20, you can set it up as a monthly recurring expense. So every month, there's an ultrasound that you are giving to a mom, and then the numbers overwhelmingly show that mom is going to say, oh my gosh, I've got to have this baby. Go, please donate today. Dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, say baby. Or if you want to go to a website, just go to preborn.com/buck, preborn.com/BUCK. Sponsored by Preborn.